Dorotea was the only one in their all-female group who did not have a husband. Teresa didn't count. She was only 19 and had no plans to get married in the next 5 years. She flirted with men, seduced them, and, laughing, broke up with them. Dorotea was already 25 years old, and she really wanted to get married. But all her attempts to marry another suitor ended in failure. She seemed to be attractive, intelligent, capable in managing a household, and had a decent position, but something repelled men from her. Whenever Dorotea started planning more serious relationships, the next suitor disappeared into nowhere. She met Antonio at work. They and her father were involved in interior renovations, and in the office where Dorotea worked, they decided to do some renovations. It was Teresa's birthday that day. After work, she threw a banquet for her colleagues. Antonio and his father were also invited. When the more family-oriented colleagues began to disperse to their homes, they decided to continue the celebration at a club. Antonio agreed to go with the girls. From that day on, Dorotea and Antonio started dating. The young man courted her beautifully, sparing no gifts and outings to restaurants, theaters, and clubs. He didn't insist on intimacy, but he also showed no desire to become a family man. After 6 months of platonic relations, Dorotea became anxious. They met almost every day, but there was nothing more than goodbye kisses. No need to say about a proposal. Dorotea's birthday was approaching. After consulting with her aunt, with whom she lived, Dorotea was from a small village in the neighboring region. They decided to celebrate her birthday with family. At home. If he dares to get to know us, then he must have serious intentions, and we just need to give him a little push, confidently said her aunt, who was also worried about her unmarried niece's fate. Dorotea was afraid that Antonio would refuse to come up with some excuse, but to her surprise and joy, he agreed. And he actually came. With 2 bouquets of flowers, one for Dorotea and one for her aunt, and an expensive gift for Dorotea. Either Antonio had a little too much to drink that evening, or Dorotea's aunt skillfully convinced him that he was already like family to them and their wedding was not far off, but that evening Dorotea and Antonio became intimate. However, Antonio's attitude toward Dorotea did not change. He remained polite, attentive, and generous, but he did not show the passion and mad love that Dorotea dreamed of. To be honest, Dorotea couldn't boast of such feelings either. She felt nothing for Antonio except sympathy and respect. But she was already 26 years old, and the coveted stamp in her passport was still missing. Antonio, I need to tell you something, Dorotea began hesitantly when they were sitting in his car. Antonio had driven her home after the movie and was about to say goodbye, but she preempted him, I'm pregnant. It seemed that he wasn't surprised by this news. He looked at Dorotea attentively and asked, why didn't you consult with me? Why did you decide on your own that we need a child? I didn't decide, Dorotea's heart sank. She had stopped using contraception on her own risk, without telling Antonio anything about it. Her aunt had advised her to do so. So, throw away those pills and start getting pregnant, she decisively commanded. Otherwise, you'll never get a proposal from him. But what if he refuses? Dorotea asked fearfully. It's not a big deal. You'll catch his eye being pregnant, post photos on social media showing your belly, and watch his conscience kick in. If that doesn't work, you'll give birth, and we'll arrange it so that the child ends up in his hands. Then he won't resist. My own husband ran away from me, but once Rodrigo held our child, he was gone for good. I even stubbornly refused to marry him afterwards. And if it doesn't work out at all? The girl asked, looking sadly at her aunt. Then you'll be a single mother. It's better than being an old maid, her aunt stated firmly. Maybe the batch of pills was defective, Dorotea suggested. Well, in that case, we'll have to give birth, Antonio calmly said and got out of the car. He walked around the car to help Dorotea out. Then he kissed her and said, see you tomorrow. Dorotea couldn't sleep all night. The next day was a day off, and in order to distract herself from sad and anxious thoughts, she decided to do some cleaning. Throughout the day, Antonio never called. In the evening, when Dorotea and her aunt were watching TV together, the doorbell rang. Antonio, his father, and a woman who seemed to be his mother stood at the doorstep. "There's a visitor in need of a hand," Antonio's father cheerfully exclaimed, while his mother pursed her lips and entered the apartment. After the wedding, the newlyweds moved in with Antonio's parents. While Dorotea was still working, she hadn't noticed how Antonio's mother treated her. But when she went on maternity leave, all the pleasures of living with an unemployed mother-in-law fell upon the young woman. She constantly nitpicked about everything, from Dorotea's cooking, which she considered incorrect, to her appearance. Antonio and his father would stay at work until late, and then Antonio started going somewhere to relax after work. Dorotea hardly saw her husband anymore. She felt hurt and lonely. To occupy herself, she started taking long walks, returning home only in the evening and immediately locking herself in their room. Dorotea struggled to get out of bed and approached the window. Unfortunately, the streetlight beneath her window was not working. From the 12th floor, it was difficult to make out what was happening down below in the pitch darkness. Dorotea returned to bed. The last months of her pregnancy had been plagued by insomnia. She wanted to go to the kitchen and have a cup of coffee, but she couldn't do so. The first time she did that, her dissatisfied mother-in-law, Eleonora, came out of her room and scolded her for wandering around the apartment at night. "Why can't you sleep? Are you waiting for Antonio?" "Why? To argue with him? He'll come back, he won't disappear. He has a demanding job, and he needs to rest. And here you are with your quarrels." But I wasn't planning to argue. Dorotea was surprised by such assumptions. "I just couldn't sleep, and I wanted to have some coffee." "Coffee in the middle of the night? For you? Why give the baby extra fluids? You should be sleeping at night, not drinking coffee. Think about the baby. Go to sleep. You can drink coffee tomorrow." In the kitchen, the sleepy father-in-law appeared. He was the only one who treated Dorotea kindly. "Why are you making a scene, Eleonora?" he asked his wife. "She's wandering around, not letting me sleep. She decided to have coffee. In the middle of the night." Eleonora replied. "So what? Is water so precious to you? You're saying the same thing. You don't mind feeding her, but you're concerned about water. I'm worried about the baby. She's tormenting him with her wanderings. And I feel sorry for you too. And what about me? Well, she woke you up. And it's still early for you to go to work. It wasn't Dorotea who woke me up, it was your screaming. Well, since I'm up, I'll have some coffee too. Let's go, Dorotea." Dorotea, ready to burst into tears, smiled reluctantly and nodded. Eleonora, with a dissatisfied look, retreated to her bedroom. Pablo boiled the kettle and prepared the cups. "Where is that good-for-nothing?" he asked when they sat down to drink coffee. "He's not here," Dorotea replied. "But he has to go to work tomorrow." Dorotea was glad that she had found an ally in this strange house, but she tried not to leave her room at night anymore. After Gabriel was born, Eleonora literally never left Dorotea alone for a minute. "How are you swaddling him? How are you feeding him? He should eat every 3 hours. Teach him a schedule from infancy. Let him cry. He needs to know that he gets food on a schedule. Why are you changing his diaper? A diaper is meant to last 6 hours. Let the baby get used to peeing after sleep and eating. Are you sleeping? What rest? You should spend your time wisely while the baby is sleeping. Go do the laundry. How does the washing machine do everything? You've gone mad. Baby clothes should only be hand-washed with baby soap. And what about ironing? Have you finished ironing everything? Have you sterilized the bottles and nipples? You need to boil them every time before giving them to the baby. After a couple of months of such control, Dorotea could barely stand on her feet. One evening, when her husband came home from work, she called him for a serious conversation. "Well, Dorotea, Mom just wants to help." Antonio tiredly resisted. He had completely distanced himself from raising their son, except for providing for him. If she wants to help, then let her actually help instead of giving advice. "I can't even take a shower peacefully while the baby is sleeping. She constantly makes me do something. I'm tired. I want to rest. But even when Gabriel sleeps at night, I can't take care of myself. Apparently, moving around the apartment wakes her up. I feel like I'm in prison here." "Dorotea, don't exaggerate." "I'm not exaggerating. But either we move out of here, or I'll take Gabriel and do it myself. But I refuse to live with your mother anymore. If we don't move out tomorrow, I won't be here the day after tomorrow." "Okay, I'll figure this out." Antonio was desperate for sleep. The next day, Dorotea waited in vain for her husband. She spent the whole day packing her things while enduring the mocking remarks from her mother-in-law. "Where do you think you're going? Antonio will never leave his mother for anything. He has comfort and proper meals here. What can you offer him?" Eleanor taunted, but Dorotea replied sharply, "Considering that I provide the comfort and cook as well, I don't think he'll even notice any changes." She no longer cared about Eleanor's opinion. Not having seen her husband all day, Dorotea called her aunt. "I can't take it anymore. Help me find a place to live," she pleaded. "Well, a neighbor of mine is moving to Germany permanently. He has a small apartment but doesn't want to sell it. However, he's afraid to rent it out. I'll ask if he'll let you stay there." Dorotea was in ecstasy and hung up the phone, triumphantly looking at her mother-in-law, who had been present during the conversation. Eleanor snorted and, as usual, pursed her lips before leaving. Antonio arrived well past midnight. When Dorotea asked about the move, he brushed her off, saying, "Dorotea, stop it. Why should we move? What's wrong with your life? You have everything you need, you're not lacking anything. What a nonsense. Besides, I have to get up early, let me sleep." The next morning, Dorotea called a taxi and left amid Eleanor's wails to stay with her aunt. Everything worked out perfectly. The neighbor of her aunt allowed Dorotea to move into his apartment, and the young woman, leaving her child with her aunt, began to create a cozy atmosphere in her new home. For the first time in months, Dorotea allowed herself to relax in the bath and tidy up her hair. Her caring aunt didn't disturb her until Dorotea came to pick up Gabriel. They sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee and talking. Dorotea recounted the past few months with her mother-in-law, while her aunt sighed and expressed sympathy. Gabriel happily blew bubbles and babbled in his baby language. Suddenly, Dorotea realized that she didn't miss her husband at all. She didn't care whether he would continue living with her or not. Settling into her new place, Dorotea put her child to bed and lay down herself. To her surprise, both she and Gabriel slept through the night without waking up. In the morning, the doorbell rang. There stood Antonio, disheveled, with red eyes, a bouquet of flowers, and a suitcase. "Dorotea, please forgive me. Yesterday, I heard so much about you from my mother that I finally understood how terrible it must have been for you in such conditions. She has never worked a day in her life. Anyone took care of us except her. But she was an expert in lecturing about life. As soon as my sister turned 18, she ran away from home and got married, moving away with her husband up north. A new phase began in Dorotea's married life. Antonio no longer lingered at work. He started helping Dorotea with household chores and spent more time with their son. Even the relationship between the spouses became more tender. With each passing day, Dorotea fell more in love with her husband, and he responded in kind. The young family started saving money for their own place. As soon as Gabriel started attending daycare, Dorotea started working. She was immediately offered a higher position, but with one condition: she had to obtain additional education more suitable for a managerial role. Dorotea gladly agreed. Another surprise awaited her from her husband. He decided to buy her a car. Dorotea enrolled in driving lessons. The woman hurried home. Today, she and her husband had planned a romantic dinner at a restaurant. Dorotea recently passed all her exams at driving school and had just received her driver's license. At the restaurant, the woman was supposed to present her husband with the new document, and Antonio would solemnly hand her the keys to the new car. The car was already parked in the yard, and Dorotea had even sat in it a few times, but the first ride in her own car was planned for tomorrow. Dorotea dropped off her son at her aunt's house and started getting ready. She bought a new dress for this dinner, hoping to impress Antonio. She wanted to show him how she truly felt about him, how much she loved and appreciated and desired him. At the appointed time, Antonio didn't show up. Dorotea called his number several times, but his phone was out of reach. She sat there all night in her new dress, with her hair and makeup done. Antonio didn't show up. In the morning, the doorbell rang. Dorotea, her legs barely able to support her, went to answer it. Pablo stood on the doorstep. "Dorotea, brace yourself." The car was registered under Pablo's name. In the early hours after a terrible accident, which left only a heap of crumpled metal, it was initially believed that the owner of the car was inside. Eleonora stood by with the phone in her hand, horror in her eyes, staring at her husband. "Pablo, I just heard that you were in an accident and died." "Where?" "Somewhere in the city center." Pablo rushed to get dressed. Eleonora, surprisingly quick, followed after him. "Pablo, what does this mean?" She lamented along the way. "Pablo, say something." When they arrived at the accident scene, the body was already being loaded into a special vehicle. Pablo only remembered fragments after that. The policeman's account of how a drunk driver, speeding from the opposite direction, collided with the car his son was driving. Eleonora was in hysterics. Then there was the cold morgue. The bloodied body of his son. More of Eleonora's hysteria. Numerous people in white coats and their voices. "Are you okay? How could things be okay when I just lost my only son? Should we give you an injection? Your wife lost consciousness, we took her to a room. In the early morning, he regained consciousness. I need to inform Dorotea. Or maybe she already knows. If she knew, she would have come." Pablo talked to himself as he got up from the hospital bench. He entered Eleonora's room. She was sleeping thanks to medication. Unhindered, he left the hospital building. He hailed a taxi. Gave Dorotea's address. Dorotea cried silently. After sobbing throughout the day and the entire night, she had no strength left, but tears continued to stream down her cheeks. Her recently acquired happiness had collapsed like a house of cards. Occasionally, her aunt would visit her apartment. She would console her, give her water and tranquilizers. Eventually, she called a nurse she knew, who administered an injection to Dorotea, and the woman fell asleep. A year had passed after Antonio's death. To keep her sanity, Dorotea fully immersed herself in work and raising her son. Her aunt actively helped her. Her mother-in-law and father-in-law had forgotten about the existence of their grandson. While Eleonora's behavior didn't surprise Dorotea, Pablo's reluctance to interact with his only grandchild was hurtful. She even tried to talk to him on the phone, but every time her mother-in-law answered and angrily shouted, "Leave us alone. We don't owe you anything." One day, Dorotea even attempted to meet Pablo in person. She went to their house and sat on a bench by the entrance, waiting for him to come out. And she waited. But as soon as he saw her, he pressed his lips together, just like his wife, and coldly said, "We have nothing to talk about." After that, Dorotea gave up all attempts to reconnect her son with his grandfather. With time, the woman's wounds began to heal, and she once again longed for the attention of men. Gabriel was already in the 3rd grade and was quite independent. Her aunt still happily helped her and insisted on resuming her personal life and finding a husband. Dorotea paid attention to the men around her. She evaluated them and even went on a couple of dates. But none of them could make her heart beat faster. Completely losing hope, she decided to get involved with a man for her own well-being. Soon, an opportunity presented itself. At one of the corporate events, Dorotea noticed a tall, imposing man with a slight touch of gray at his temples and confident gray eyes. She tried to discreetly observe him, but he noticed her attention and raised his glass in greeting. Dorotea smiled widely in response and immediately turned away. Let him not think that he had piqued her interest too much. But with the first slow song, she heard by her ear, "Would you like to dance?" The voice was so soft, enveloping, and promising otherworldly pleasures that Dorotea, without hesitation, turned around and accepted the invitation. The man introduced himself as Ignacio, and throughout the dance, he showered Dorotea with compliments. When the dance ended, he kissed her hand and escorted her to the bar. "I hope we'll see each other again." His velvety voice didn't give her a chance to refuse. "He's married." Teresa's voice snapped Dorotea out of her daze, and she looked at her colleague. "He's our new head of the legal department." Her friend continued. "A magnificent man. It's a pity he's married." "I don't care. I'm not planning on having children with him." Dorotea replied curtly, trying not to show how disappointed she was by the news. After the weekend following the corporate event, Dorotea found a small but beautiful bouquet of flowers with a note. "To the most enchanting dance partner." She smiled and put the bouquet in water. The next day, the situation with the bouquet repeated itself. Throughout the week, Dorotea would find a small bouquet on her desk in the morning, but without any notes. In the last bouquet, there was a tiny heart-shaped card with just one word written on it: "Would you like to have a lunch together?" Usually, Dorotea didn't go out for lunch, limiting herself to the food she brought from home and ate right in the office. But curiosity got the better of her. What does this married handsome man want from her? Is it just to have some fun, or is it a genuinely strong and pure feeling that is immune to public opinion, morality, and obligations? As soon as the clock struck 12, Dorotea got up from her desk, put on her coat, and leisurely left the office. She never expected that at the age of 35, she would lose her head like this. Just one shared lunch, and Dorotea was smitten. His eyes caressed her entire body. His voice enveloped her, making her forget about everything else. "I never thought I would be able to lose my head again over a woman," Ignacio passionately whispered to her on their first date, which happened on the same day after their first shared lunch. That day, Dorotea returned home from work and stood in front of the mirror for a long time, examining herself from head to toe. "What are you hoping for?" she asked herself. "He's married. He has a family. And even if he feels something for you, it's temporary. Snap out of it. Use your head." But her head refused to cooperate. Dorotea's thoughts were consumed by Ignacio. Oh, if only Gabriel were home, he would distract her from these sinful thoughts. But her son had gone to sleep at a friend's place, leaving her alone with her forbidden feelings. Dorotea sat in the room, still dressed in her work clothes. Her memory eagerly supplied her with recollections of their lunch that day. They talked about mundane topics, but his eyes told a different story. And to her shame, Dorotea suspected that she herself looked at Ignacio like a foolishly infatuated girl. And when Ignacio lightly touched her as they were leaving the restaurant, it felt like an electric shock, and a fiery mixture spread through her stomach, akin to the effects of strong alcohol. The doorbell rang. "Gabriel!" The woman rejoiced and rushed to open it. But standing at the doorstep was Ignacio, holding a large bouquet of crimson roses and a bag from the supermarket. "Ignacio, what are we doing?" Dorotea tried to get up from the bed, but the man pulled her towards him. "We're trying to be happy," he kissed her on the forehead. "Aren't you happy with your wife? The feelings we had for each other have long faded away. We're living together because of our daughter. Well, and because we haven't met those who would make us leave our families. At least, that's the case for my wife. And you? Dorotea mentally scolded herself for asking such a question, but she couldn't help it. Ignacio propped himself up on his elbow and looked Dorotea directly in the eyes. When I saw you, I felt like I was in a fairy tale. Until then, I hadn't even considered the possibility of falling head over heels like this. Like a young boy. I lost my mind, all my thoughts were consumed by you. All week, I tried to convince myself not to dream about you, but I couldn't help it. So, I decided to invite you to lunch and find out if I had a chance. So what have you decided? Under the penetrating gaze of Ignacio, Dorotea began to stutter slightly. Ignacio gently stroked her head, kissed her with a long and tender kiss, and finally answered, "That I have to find you and kiss you until you agree to be my lover." No one knew about their relationship except Dorotea's aunt. At work, they behaved with each other in a conspicuously polite manner. Only occasionally, when they found themselves alone together on the staircase, in the elevator, or in one of their offices, they would steal moments of tenderness. Their meetings were regular, though not as frequent as they would have liked. Ignacio didn't want to hurt his wife's feelings with blatant infidelity. He adhered faithfully to all the family traditions, be it Sunday lunch, shopping trips with his wife, trips to the countryside, or visits to his mother-in-law. There's no need for my daughter to suspect anything. She's a sensitive girl, and the news that I love another woman could greatly unsettle her. And then, there will be no end to the problems. I want her to finish college calmly and get a decent job. Or even better, get married. Then she won't have time to worry about her father's feelings. Dorotea understood that he was right. And in her situation, it was better to endure and wait. Since fate had led her to fall in love and become involved with a married man. However, her aunt did not share her position. "Dorotea, are you out of your mind? If a man wants to leave his family, he will. And no one can stop him, not his wife or his children, no matter how old they are. He has already made it clear that your status as a mistress will not change for the next few years. And then, if he still feels drawn to you, he will come up with something else. From his wife's terminal illness to helping with grandchildren. Leave him before it's too late. Find yourself a free man." Their affair had been going on for 4 years already. This year, Ignacio's daughter was graduating from college, and Dorotea hoped that soon he would belong to her alone. Ignacio himself dreamt of it. "We have to wait for a little bit. Just a bit more patience, and we will be happy." Due to final exams and thesis defense, Ignacio started visiting Dorotea less frequently. "My love, right now she needs support more than ever. I simply have to be there for her." Dorotea understood and increasingly found herself sitting alone in the evenings, feeling melancholic. Her son would disappear with his friends to sports clubs and the theater workshop at school. He would only return home to sleep. How does he manage to do it all? Dorotea wondered, looking at her sleeping son. Their small apartment didn't allow them personal spaces. The woman began to contemplate buying a more spacious flat for herself. She would have done it long ago if it weren't for Ignacio. She wanted them to choose their future family nest together and furnish it together. "Hold on, my dear. Soon you will have your own room, and you'll be able to not only sleep at your friends, but also invite them over. Just a little longer." "Hey!" Teresa peeked into the office. "What are you up to this weekend?" Dorotea looked at the clock. It was lunchtime. Today wasn't their day. Ignacio was having lunch with his daughter. "I don't know yet." Dorotea shrugged and turned on the kettle to make herself some coffee and a snack. Ignacio hadn't said whether he would be able to come over on the weekend. For a moment, the thought crossed her mind that her entire life had revolved around meetings with her lover for the past few years. "What do you have on your mind?" she asked. "Let's go to the nightclub." Teresa quickly climbed onto the stool next to Dorotea and, pulling out another cup from the cupboard, reached for the coffee jar. Teresa, what are you talking about? How old are we? Dorotea was surprised. 150. Dorotea, what does age have to do with it? Well, we're not exactly old and feeble. Let's go to a decent place without teenagers. Teresa grabbed one of the sandwiches from Dorotea's container without asking and took a greedy bite. Sorry for my audacity. I overslept today and didn't have time to pack anything. Besides, I don't want to spend money at a cafe. Especially since I'm going to a club. So, what do you say? Shall we go? All right. But first, I'll check with my family to see if they have any plans for my weekend. Dorotea smiled. Of course. Teresa smiled back. Her cheerful and unyielding nature infected those around her with optimism. After being married for a few years, Teresa divorced, explaining it by saying, "It's not my thing to take care of a man." Freeing herself from the shackles of marriage, she began flirting and batting her eyelashes at men again. But as soon as another suitor mentioned marriage, Teresa showed him the door. Dorotea envied such independence and occasionally asked herself why she couldn't live the same way. Why couldn't she treat men lightly, joyfully, and carefree? Did you know? After a brief silence caused by devouring the sandwich, Teresa started talking again. Our head of the legal department, that handsome guy, has started an affair with his secretary. Dorotea was left speechless. She stared at her friend with wide eyes. Interpreting it in her own way, Teresa continued. Imagine, this girl, about 20 years old, barely got hired, and she's already caught the attention of our unflappable handsome man. They say he's even filed for divorce. But he has a daughter, Dorotea muttered. Oh, come on. Since when do children hold men back? Besides, his daughter is already grown up, finishing college. She couldn't care less about her father. She has her own life. Apparently, something had changed in Dorotea's expression. Teresa suddenly fell silent and then exclaimed in concern. Dorotea, are you okay? You've turned so pale. Dorotea tried to compose herself. Yes. I just need to take a blood pressure pill. You got me talking, and instead of yogurt, I drank coffee. And I've already reached my coffee quota for today. I didn't know you had high blood pressure. Well, I'm not so old that I have to talk about my health problems on every corner, Dorotea replied, trying to sound as cheerful as possible. After Teresa left, Dorotea dialed Ignacio's number. I'm listening. Judging by his voice, Ignacio wasn't alone. Ignacio, I need to talk to you urgently. Right away. Apparently, something in her voice frightened the man, and he hastily replied. Okay, I'll be there in a few minutes. Those few minutes felt like years to Dorotea. She tried to calm down and compose herself. She shouldn't let such gossip bother her. And that's all it was, gossip, nothing more. Ignacio burst into her office with a worried look on his face. He threw a stack of papers on the table, presumably to give the impression of being busy in front of his colleagues, and sat down across from Dorotea. Dorotea, what happened? He asked. Is it true that you're having an affair with your secretary and getting a divorce? The woman tried to speak calmly, without emotion. To start with, it would have been honest of you to inform me. Dorotea, what are you saying? Ignacio began, but Dorotea interrupted him. I understand that our relationship is strictly confidential, and I won't suffer from your affairs. But still, I have the right to know if I've been left. Fine. I'll tell you. Yes, it's true. I've fallen in love with someone else and I'm planning to marry her. I didn't tell you anything because I didn't want a scandal. So, you slept with me and were afraid of a scandal? Dorotea suddenly became coldly calm. Well, yes. Women like you always throw fits when they're being dumped. My wife yelled so loudly, I thought the windows would shatter. I'm not your wife. Thankfully, hysterics are not my thing. Dorotea leaned back in her chair. Fine, I understand. You could have told me all of this yourself. Consider we've broke up. What do you mean? Ignacio stared at Dorotea as if he had just seen her for the first time. As you planned? You'll get a divorce, marry a young woman, and I'll remain your mistress? No, sorry, I have other plans. A phone call saved her from further conversation. Sorry, the CEO is calling. She pointed to the door. The rest of the day, Dorotea went through the motions. She interacted with colleagues, answered calls, and carried out her work. Her heart felt frozen. Only when she got home, she gave vent to tears. She cried all night. By morning, her face looked as if Dorotea had slept in a beehive. She couldn't show up at work like that. She called in sick, informing them that she was unwell. Fortunately, she and her colleagues were allowed a few sick days a year. Dorotea ran herself a hot bath and was about to get in when sudden dizziness made her grab onto the wall. Yes. Nerves are serious business after all. The woman thought, sitting on the edge of the tub. Her head was still spinning. Canceling the bath, Dorotea went to her room and lay down in bed. She called her aunt. It seems I have some problems with my blood pressure. Within a few minutes, her aunt was fussing around Dorotea with a blood pressure monitor. HM. Slightly low, but not critical, she exclaimed. Did you eat or drink something unusual? And why is your face so swollen? Dorotea told her everything. I warned you. Her aunt began, but noticing the tears in her niece's eyes, she softened her tone. All right. There's no point grieving over that scoundrel now. You're still young, you'll find someone else. That's enough. I'll live for myself and my son. No more men, exclaimed Dorotea, bursting into tears again. The next day, Dorotea felt worse. Concerned, her aunt called a doctor. I would recommend you to undergo an examination, the doctor said grimly, filling out a form. Without tests, it's difficult to determine what's happening to you. It could be simple exhaustion, or it could be symptoms of a more serious illness. Well, my dear, the elderly woman doctor smiled at Dorotea maternally. Almost everything seems fine with you. The tests didn't reveal anything serious. What did they reveal that's not serious? Dorotea asked anxiously. Well, it's not exactly something insignificant. It's serious, but not in relation to your health. You're speaking in riddles. Dorotea became angry. You're going to have a baby, the doctor announced cheerfully. Now you must take better care of your health. Really? That's great. Dorotea started laughing. Interpreting her laughter in her own way, the doctor began issuing various referrals and prescriptions, simultaneously explaining what Dorotea should do now, how to take care of her health and nutrition. The woman left the doctor's office on the verge of hysteria. A child. She was going to have a child. A not-so-young, abandoned woman with limited living conditions. Suddenly, she felt like having a drink. Dorotea reached her car and sat down, lost in thought. What will I tell my son? How will my colleagues react to her situation? How will I raise the child in a small apartment? Maybe, yes. I should have an abortion. She wouldn't have to explain anything to anyone. Have you lost your mind? Her aunt's face turned so red that Dorotea worried about her health. What do you mean, an abortion? Is the child to blame? But how can I, alone, in a small apartment? Dorotea tried to explain the impossibility of having another child. What? First of all, you're not alone. You have me and Gabriel. He's already a grown, independent guy. He'll help if needed. You earn well, so you won't starve. And as for the apartment, didn't you want to get a mortgage? Well, now's the perfect time. You'll have enough time for renovations before the birth. Dorotea looked closely at her aunt. How lucky she was to have her. And she was right. The child wasn't to blame for having a wayward mother. The child had a right to life. And if the mother reconsidered her attitude towards men, everything would be fine. The three of them would manage just fine. "You're right," she replied to her aunt. "Tomorrow, I'll go to the bank, find out how much I've saved, and start looking for a suitable apartment." In the bank, there was a decent sum of money. Ever since Dorotea and Antonio decided to save for a house, she habitually deposited money into the account every month. With the loss of her husband, she forgot about the new apartment, but the account continued to grow. Thanks to this, she now had more than enough for the down payment. Dorotea began searching for a new apartment. Returning to work from her short medical leave, Dorotea had undergone a complete transformation. Now, in front of her colleagues and subordinates, she was not only a competent professional and strict leader, but also a beautiful, well-groomed, and stylish woman, radiating a smile that had been rare before. "She's in love," whispered her colleagues behind her back. She finally found a man, discussed her subordinates. "You're not yourself lately." Teresa burst into Dorotea's office. "Tell me, have you met someone?" "Even better." Dorotea smiled. "I'm expecting a baby." "No way." Teresa was shocked by the news and sank into a chair. "Who is the father?" "It doesn't matter. He's no longer here." "Did he pass away?" Teresa's voice turned into a loud whisper. "Shame on you." Dorotea waved her hands and proceeded to tell the prepared story. "A few months ago, I met a foreigner. We had a short but beautiful and happy romance. Just recently, I found out that I'm expecting a child from this wonderful romance. I'm thrilled that my last love affair has borne fruit, reminding me of that happy time." "But you haven't told him?" Teresa's eyes widened. "No. I'm sure he's a decent person, and he would have come to me immediately to start a family. But the thing is, I don't want to get married. I don't want the mundane routine, as I'm not sure our life together would be as happy and carefree as our romance." "You're unbelievable." Teresa's voice returned to a whisper. "Why didn't I think of this before? To have a child from the most beautiful romance and live for yourself and the child. Getting married is not necessary at all, Dorote. You're a genius. But let's keep it a secret for now. We'll announce it when it becomes impossible to hide." Dorotea looked seriously at her friend. "Of course. I won't tell anyone." Teresa rushed out of the office. In the evening, at home, Dorotea was browsing through apartment listings. Gabriel, who was home for the first time in months, was helping his mother with the selection. When Dorotea informed him that he would soon have a brother or sister, her son delighted her with his reaction. "That's great. Otherwise, it would just be the two of us, excluding Grandma, I mean your aunt. I was worried that in a few years, I'd have to leave you to live independently, and you'd be all alone. But now, you'll have another sibling." Dorotea gently stroked her son's head. "Thank you, my dear." The doorbell rang. Who could it be so late? Dorotea wondered and, exchanging a glance with Gabriel, went to open it. Pablo was standing in front of her. "Hello, Dorotea. Can I?" "Yes, of course, come in." The man took off his shoes and walked into the room. He sat on the edge of a chair, staring at the floor, nervously twiddling his cap. Dorotea and Gabriel sat opposite, waiting for him to speak. "Dorotea, forgive me for all these years. And you, Gabriel, forgive me." Pablo fell silent again. "So, are you my grandfather?" Gabriel couldn't bear the prolonged pause. "Where have you been all this time?" "Gabriel, stop it." Dorotea stopped him, noticing how Pablo's shoulders trembled and then slumped even further. "Why don't you go and put the kettle on? I'm not angry at you." She addressed Pablo when her son left the room. "You don't owe me anything. I do owe you." The man stood up and paced around the room. "You were my son's wife, the mother of my grandson, and I abandoned you when you were going through a difficult time, knowing that you had no one except your aunt. That's all in the past. I came to apologize and explain why I acted that way. Pablo sat back in the chair. Eleonora. She believed that you were responsible for Antonio's death and threatened to jump out of the window if I maintained any contact with you. I tried to convince her that you were not to blame, but she rushed to the window and climbed onto the windowsill. I was so frightened then. However, I loved that volatile woman, or else I wouldn't have lived with her all these years. What happened now? Why did she change her mind? Dorotea, shocked by the story, feared that her father-in-law was endangering his family life. Eleonora passed away. There's no one left to forbid me from seeing you. If you allow me, of course. I'm sorry for your loss. At that moment, Gabriel came in from the kitchen. Let's have coffee. Dorotea, I noticed on your computer that you had an open page with apartment listings. Is it what I think it is? Yes. We're looking for a new place for ourselves. Do you want to take out a mortgage? Of course, why? I've decided to sell my apartment. I can't bear to be in it without Eleonora. I'm staying with friends for now. Once I sell it, I'll buy myself a one-bedroom place and would like to give you the rest of the money. Oh, come on. No. Don't even resist. I have no use for that money, and I owe you for all these years. You don't owe us anything. Of course I do. My moral convictions won't allow me to act otherwise. If I didn't have the opportunity to help you before, now I do. So, don't resist. You look good. A familiar voice made Dorotea tense. Quickly regaining her composure, she turned around calmly and smiled, saying, "Thank you." Ignoring his companion's reaction, Ignacio stared intently at Dorotea, searching for any sign of lingering feelings toward him. But her gaze was serene, her posture relaxed. Are you alone? He disregarded the fact that his girlfriend took him by the arm and tried to pull him away. Maybe you'd like to join us? Ignacio. The girl was clearly outraged. We wanted to have lunch together. No, thank you, I'm not alone, Dorotea calmly replied, maintaining her smile. At that moment, Teresa entered the restaurant and waved at her friend. What did you say to our handsome lawyer that he can't take his eyes off you? Dorotea sat at the table with her back to her former lover, while Teresa sat opposite, witnessing Ignacio's gaze fixed on Dorotea. I asked if his secretary was the one who made the contract with the repairman who will fix our roof. So many grammatical mistakes. Apparently, it was hers since he's looking at me like that. Oh well. Let him double-check next time. The women burst into laughter. Dorotea, caressing her stomach, walked around her new apartment. Everything turned out remarkably well. The apartment was found in the same building as her aunt's. It was bright, spacious, with a large kitchen and a balcony. Now Dorotea and Gabriel had their own separate rooms. Thanks to the help of Pablo Antonio, Dorotea managed to secure a mortgage for a much shorter term. Pablo himself moved into the apartment where Dorotea lived and negotiated with the owner for its purchase. Her interesting condition didn't escape the notice of her colleagues. Whispers of excitement followed her again. Speculations were made about the identity of the lucky father. The assumptions were wild until Teresa, as a friend, clarified the situation. Her last love left her a gift, besides fond memories. When a reasonable question arose as to why her last love wasn't living with her boss, an answer was provided. Why bother? Over time, the feelings will fade, but the daily routine remains. And Dorotea is no longer at an age where she wants to cloud her life with routine. She will have a child who will remind her of a happy period in her life, without a tired man demanding attention and food by her side. So, is that true? A startled Dorotea turned abruptly and bumped into Ignacio. Her belly literally bumped into him. Well, yes. I can see. What is true, and what do you see? The woman tried to regain her composure. You are pregnant. Oh, really? Well, yes, it's hard not to notice. And? Why are you interested in that? Is it my child? No. It's mine. Dorotea turned back to the car and was about to open the door to get in, but Ignacio grabbed her hand and turned her towards him. Why didn't you tell me anything? Why should I have told you anything? We broke up, our relationship ended, my future life has nothing to do with you. Just like yours has nothing to do with me. Dorotea tried to gently free her hand, but the man held it firmly. But you're pregnant with my child. I should have known. Why? So you could convince me to have an abortion? Or what? Or intimidate me so that I wouldn't ask you for anything? Well, I wasn't expecting anything from you anyway. I just wanted to have another baby. That's all. And what would you have done if you knew? Well, I don't know. Maybe we could have worked something out. Worked something out? Dorotea laughed. You left me for a young girl. What could you offer my child besides my tears and nerves? Money? We already have that. Care, love, and attention. Highly unlikely. So why should I have informed you about my pregnancy? And let go of my hand already. It hurts. At that moment, something hit Ignacio on his back. He turned around in surprise and saw an elderly man swinging his arm for another strike. Hey, scoundrel, let go of my daughter right now. The man yelled and hit Ignacio again, this time in the chest. Pablo. Calm down. Dorotea addressed him. He's just an emotional acquaintance. He's leaving now. Go away, Ignacio. Get out of here, and don't let me see you again. Ignacio sat at his home, systematically getting drunk. Well, it wasn't really his home, but the apartment of his new young wife. He left his apartment for his first wife and daughter. Darling, are you going? Your kitty is already missing you. A sickly sweet and therefore highly irritating voice came from the bedroom belonging to his young spouse. How did he end up like this? What drove them when he succumbed to the allure of a young, scantily clad body? He had always been attracted to a woman's intellect and then her appearance. What happened then when he, like an obedient fool, jumped into bed with this naive young girl? He truly loved Dorotea. And she loved him, he could see that. Yes, over the past couple of years, he had grown accustomed to these relationships, and they had become monotonous to him. But there could have been something he could do. No. He was afraid of something. Perhaps, if Dorotea had told him about her pregnancy, he would have left everything and married her. And he would have been happy now. Thin fingers with manicured nails rested on his shoulder. Darling, are you coming soon? Why are you drinking so much? What about your little kitty? Can you make her happy with that much alcohol? Ignacio gently tapped the delicate hands and reached for his glass again. No, my dear. Tonight, your kitty will sleep in the living room, accompanied by a bottle of cognac. You go to the bedroom. And please, don't distract me anymore. Hugo was born right on time. He was a healthy and strong little boy. He caused Dorotea almost no trouble, and she had plenty of help from Auntie and Pablo. They would come over every day. After recovering a bit from childbirth and establishing a routine with the new addition to the family, Dorotea started contemplating going back to work. Her superiors were eagerly awaiting her return, and although the mortgage payments had significantly reduced, Dorotea had deposited all the substantial payments she received upon the birth of her child. They were still as regular as ever. During a family meeting, it was decided that Dorotea would be allowed to work at least half a day. Meanwhile, Hugo would be under the careful supervision of Auntie and Pablo. When Dorotea returned to work, she had visibly slimmed down and looked rejuvenated. The birth of her baby and the support of her family had made a difference. Dorotea, you look like you just came back from a resort, not maternity leave, exclaimed Teresa, admiring her friend. Well, it seems like you haven't wasted any time either. Dorotea looked significantly at Teresa's small but noticeable baby bump. Yes, I decided that you're my model to follow. Although there's a little problem. Oh? What is it? Dorotea worried about her friend. The father of the baby doesn't want me to raise it without him. And who is the father? Well, a programmer. Not from our company. He's a freelancer. He works from home for some American company. You'll see. He comes to meet me every day. I don't know how to break free. Is he that bad? No, he's fine. Polite, attractive, caring. Earns decent money. But you know my stance on men. I don't want to maintain a family hearth for them. Teresa rushed off, and Dorotea smiled, lost in thought. It's funny how things turn out. She used to wonder about her friend's position regarding men, and now she fully supported it. Days flew by. Dorotea started working not just half a day but the full day, as insisted by her nannies. Why would you go back and forth? You won't get anything done at work, and everything will be chaotic at home. No way. Go for the full day and don't worry about a thing. Pablo and I will manage somehow. Plus, your Gabriel is always there to help. And that settled it. After work, Dorotea rushed to the store, bought groceries, and hurried home. After taking a shower and changing clothes, she bid her aunt goodbye and took care of the household chores that her aunt hadn't managed to complete. Dorotea dedicated her weekends entirely to her boys. She interacted, played, went for walks or to cafes with them. Sometimes they simply ordered pizza and watched cartoons together at home. Often, Auntie would join them too. On Sundays, Dorotea would prepare a big family dinner and treat her relatives to various delicious dishes. They would sit at the table for a long time, talking, drinking several cups of coffee, and being completely satisfied with each other. "How's my son?" Ignacio entered the office swiftly, without knocking or greeting. "Ignacio, have you forgotten your manners?" Dorotea didn't even look at him, studying the papers. "Don't you think I have the right to see my child?" Ignoring her remark, the man continued. "If he was your child, no problem. But he's not yours. And if you don't have anything work-related with me, please leave. I'm very busy." Dorotea continued reading the documents. "You don't have the right." Dorotea didn't hear what she didn't have the right to. There was a knock on the door, and a young man in work overalls entered. "Hello. Alarm system check. May I?" Dorotea diverted her gaze from the documents and looked at the newcomer. "Yes, please." The repairman placed his large toolbox on the floor and left momentarily but returned with a stepladder in his hands. "Would you allow?" He asked Ignacio and nudged him slightly, indicating that he was standing right under the sensor. "I haven't finished." Ignacio exclaimed indignantly and stormed out of the office. "Sorry I interrupted you," the young man apologized, "but you understand, it's my job, and I have my own deadlines too." "No need to apologize. Our head of the legal department is just not in a good mood today," Dorotea smiled. The young man smiled back at her with a disarming childlike smile and reached for the ceiling. Throughout the day after the repairman left, Dorotea couldn't stop thinking about his smile. Such smiles are rarely seen in adults. One could say, never. Ignacio attempted several more times to catch her off guard and assert his rights to their son. When Dorotea had enough of it, she threatened him with a complaint to the CEO and filing a police report. "As a lawyer, you should understand the consequences for you. So, leave me alone." Dorotea's gaze at that moment was so determined that Ignacio understood she wasn't joking, and it would be better for him to leave her alone. But how could he? Every day, he would see her walking down the corridor, attracting the attention of male colleagues. A couple of times, he overheard conversations between them, with each expressing an interest in courting Dorotea. Some even tried, but she made it clear that she had no intention of pursuing any relationships. The interested men were left only to sigh. Ignacio was literally kicking himself for once trading Dorotea for a young lady. How she irritated him now. Her way of dressing seemed vulgar, not sexy. Her chatter was no longer cute and lighthearted, but rather foolish and annoying. Her kitten nickname drove Ignacio to the point where he could barely restrain himself from hitting the girl. He began contemplating divorce. But where could he go? His wife had long since found someone else and claimed to be happy with him. Dorotea wanted nothing to do with him, and even the child she had with him didn't contribute to her forgiveness. Dorotea, the CEO, entered the office. We've decided to upgrade all our alarms, so you'll have to endure some inconvenience for a while. What do you mean? Dorotea frowned. She didn't like it when something or someone distracted her at work. There will be another person in your office, a sensor specialist, the CEO explained. Dorotea was about to frown dramatically and express her hope that it wouldn't be for long, but then someone knocked on the office door, and the recently cheerful repairman entered. Hello. His smile made her forget her intention to frown. And here he is. Dorotea, meet Leo, your temporary neighbor. Pleased to meet you, the man smiled again. I'll try not to overstay my welcome. Feel free to stay as long as necessary, Dorotea smiled back, as long as our alarm upgrade goes smoothly. They became friends. Leo turned out to be an interesting and unobtrusive conversationalist. He knew when to stay silent and when to cheer her up. Every evening, Dorotea would smile as she recalled the entire day spent with him. And in the morning, she rushed to work to see him as soon as possible. They went out to lunch together several times. With each passing day, their friendship grew stronger. Ignacio couldn't help but notice that Dorotea was spending a lot of time with Leo. Every time he saw them together, he clenched his teeth and fists. It was unbearable for him to realize that Dorotea was giving so much time and attention to some ordinary laborer rather than to him, Ignacio. If he had previously harbored hopes that she would stop being angry at him and want to reconcile, now those hopes vanished at lightning speed as he saw her genuinely enjoying conversations with this repairman, laughing wholeheartedly at his jokes. To disrupt this idyll in any way, Ignacio conducted his own investigation into his former lover's new interest. What he found inspired him. And seizing the moment when they were returning from a meeting, Ignacio approached Dorotea and said, Do you know that your lover is married and has a child? And so? The woman's reaction was not what he expected. It's not surprising that such a kind, open, and well-mannered man has a wife. That's firstly. Secondly, he's not a lover to me but a good friend. Perhaps you're not aware, but friendship can exist between a man and a woman. And thirdly, as you know, I've already had a relationship with a married man, so there's nothing new for me here, and I have no intention of falling into depression over it. Dorotea gave Ignacio a contemptuous look and hurried towards her office. The weather was warm over the weekend, and Dorotea decided to take her sons to the park. Pablo joined them. They strolled leisurely through the park, with Pablo entertaining Dorotea with stories from his youth while Gabriel played tag with Hugo. The 2-year-old Hugo impressed everyone with his liveliness and energy. After some time, the cheerful group grew hungry. They decided to go to a cafe for a snack. However, all the tables were occupied in the nearest expensive cafe. What could they do? It was a weekend. They were about to leave when Dorotea heard someone calling her name. Dorotea. She turned towards the familiar voice and saw Leo waving at her from a corner of the establishment. They approached him, and Leo was not alone. He sat at a rather large table with a little girl, around 8 years old, by his side. They greeted each other and took a seat. Meet my daughter, Nora, Leo said, smiling his captivating smile as he looked at Dorotea. She gazed back at him, filled with joy at seeing him. They continued to spend time together. And where's your spouse? Pablo cautiously asked. He immediately noticed the way Dorotea and Leo looked at each other. But Dorotea had never mentioned such a relationship with this man. She had always referred to him as a good friend, and her demeanor indicated that it was truly just friendship. But today's meeting showed Pablo otherwise. From an outsider's perspective, it was clear that their relationship went beyond friendship, even though they behaved like best friends. "I don't know," Leo replied, noticing Pablo's surprised gaze. "We haven't lived together for a long time. Agata is a very ambitious and busy person. She adores her job as a designer and constantly strives to improve herself in it. She's always into different courses, exhibitions, and developing new projects. 2 years after we got married, we realized that we are completely incompatible. She can't imagine her life without movement, work, and new experiences, unlike me. I am more calm and home-oriented. Agata is a good mother, but the family holds her back. Currently, she works for a prestigious international company and is doing her best. The company's management doesn't welcome divorced or single women in their ranks, so we decided not to get divorced. At least for now. I try to take care of our daughter as much as possible, so Agata can have free time for her work." "That's commendable," Pablo managed to respond, noticing the hope that sparkled in Dorotea's eyes. Dorotea was heading home. Today, Leo had finished his work, and perhaps they would never see each other again. She had hoped that he would somehow indicate their future relationship, but the man remained silent. "Well, I guess our friendship has come to an expected end," Dorotea decided. Although she liked Leo as a man, she never considered a romantic relationship with him. Having their friendship was enough for her. She believed that a good friendship was better than a painful romantic ending, and she had lost faith in her own happiness and love. Life had taught her harsh lessons in romantic relationships. They approached the door to her office together, and instead of the expected gesture of gentlemanly courtesy from Leo, opening the door for her, he suddenly embraced her and pulled her close. She didn't resist, only looked at him questioningly. "Dorotea, I don't want to lose you." His face was so close that she could feel his excited breath. "I want you to know that you mean the world to me." "Leo, I've grown fond of you too, and I wouldn't want us to stop communicating. You have my phone number, and we can go out with the kids on weekends." "It's not about that." "What do you mean?" "I like you as a woman. I want to be with you." "Leo," Dorotea tried to free herself gently, primarily to prevent him from noticing her trembling. "We are a bit different. I'm older than you. I have 2 children and a complicated fate. Why would you want that? I genuinely care about you and want our friendship to continue. Friendship, but nothing more." "Why?" "In time, if we become lovers, you will realize that I'm not suitable for you as a woman. I'm sure you would try to be considerate and not hurt me, but it would still be painful for me. And I don't want to repeat my past relationships. Let's stay friends if you can accept it." Leo looked into her eyes, and she could read his regret, desperation, and resistance in them, but he said aloud, "Okay, let's stay friends." Dorotea sadly looked at the spot where Leo's desk had been just a short while ago. Since their last meeting, he hadn't called. Teresa peeked into the door. Her belly had grown significantly. "Dorotea, am I interrupting?" "No, come in." Teresa entered, walked around the office for a bit, and sat opposite Dorotea, nervously tapping her fingers on the table. "Something happened?" Dorotea asked anxiously, looking at her friend. "You know, I had an ultrasound." "And what was there?" "Teresa, don't keep me waiting." "It's a boy." "That's great. Consider him already engaged. I'll gather everything Hugo has outgrown." "Thank you. But that's not why I'm here." "What do you mean?" "You see, I've been thinking. Doesn't the boy need a father?" "Teresa, the boy needs a good role model." "And who will that be?" "I won't claim that I am such an example, but I've always tried to show Gabriel that I'm a good person." "Exactly. Dorotea, you're a decent example in that regard. But what about me? I'm flighty and inconsistent. Possibly, having a child will change you. But what if it doesn't? Teresa nervously drummed her fingers on the table again. Dorotea looked closely at her friend. It was clear that something else was bothering her. What wasn't she saying? Suddenly, it struck Dorotea, Teresa was trying to justify herself in some way. But in what? Teresa, spill it, she ordered her friend in a commanding tone. Teresa looked at her with fear in her eyes and, taking a deep breath, said, "You see, Basilio has been very persistent. He literally doesn't give me any space. He meets me from work every day, takes me home, buys groceries, and knows everything about the progress of my pregnancy." "I see. And? I can't understand. Does this scare you or? I like it. Okay, so what's the problem? I don't want to be a domestic servant, serving my husband." "Who said you would be? Apparently, all those responsibilities will be taken care of by your Basilio." "But what if they won't? What if he's only this caring now? And later, he'll chain me to the stove and iron?" "Well, then you'll divorce him." "But it's worth a try, isn't it? What if you like it? What if you can have a wonderful family together? Not all men see women as serving staff. There are those who take care of the family. Maybe you should give it a shot with Basilio? You can even start by just living together, without getting married. You're not prudish, are you? So, you think I should give it a try?" Teresa pretended to hesitate, but her eyes revealed that Dorotea's advice made her happy and relieved. "Of course." In the evening, the phone rang. "Dorotea, Basilio invited me on a date." "Great. You should go." "Yes, but I decided to tease him a little and told him that I don't want to see him alone yet. So, he suggested that I bring a friend along, and he'll bring a friend too. Dorotea, will you come? So, you want me to go on a date with you and keep some unknown man company?" "Well, Dorotea, please. I can't just give in like that. If I go alone, he will surely charm me, and I won't resist. And my whole plan will go down the drain." "Teresa, what is the plan?" "That I'm willing to be with him, but only because of the child. So that he doesn't relax." "Oh, come on." "Thank you, Dorotea. We'll pick you up tomorrow at 7 in the evening." Teresa quickly hung up. Dorotea smiled and shook her head. Well, why not help her friend? Besides, she hadn't been anywhere in a long time. "Dorotea, it went really well, didn't it?" Teresa, delighted, kept bouncing in her seat in the car. "I was surprised too when I saw Leo. Turns out, he and Basilio are friends. Why didn't you tell me about it?" She turned to the handsome man sitting next to her, who adored her. "Teresa, there wasn't an opportunity," Basilio began in an apologetic tone. "We haven't met much. I would have introduced you to all my friends if our relationship had continued. By the way, is Dorotea acquainted with Leo?" "Yes. And I am too. Your Leo installed sensors in our office." When Dorotea approached the car that had pulled up to her building and saw Leo, she thought he was here by chance for work. But then a smiling Teresa appeared in the rear window, waving her hand, beckoning Dorotea to get in the car. "Hello." Leo smiled with the same enchanting smile that had won over Dorotea immediately. "So, the evening promises to be even more enjoyable than planned." "Good evening," Dorotea could only manage to say. The words got stuck in her throat. She was overjoyed to see Leo and, at the same time, worried about how he would behave. Throughout the evening, Leo couldn't take his eyes off her, which did not go unnoticed by Teresa and Basilio. When the women went to the restroom to freshen up, Teresa bombarded Dorotea with questions. "Dorotea, what does this mean? Leo looks at you like an infatuated boy. And you don't look like just a pleasant conversationalist. Was there something between you?" "No." Dorotea answered abruptly, causing Teresa to become even more eager to find out everything. "Really? You haven't realized yet that you're drawn to each other?" Or you have realized but feel shy. Or maybe you tried to say it, but something got in the way. Teresa. He's married. Dorotea rudely interrupted the barrage of questions. Really? I didn't notice any rings. And it's not necessary. I just know. And he also has a daughter. It's true. He said that he and his wife haven't lived together for a long time, but they don't get divorced because it would harm her career. Anything is possible, Teresa pondered, but even if that's the case, you're right. A married man is a married man, no matter how he justifies it. So, be careful with him. Thank you, Teresa, for understanding. At the same time, a similar conversation was taking place at their table. Leo, I see you have feelings for Dorotea? Basilio looked closely at his friend. I understand that you know each other. Was there something between you? No, Leo fiddled with a napkin in his hands. I just worked in her office, and that's where I met her and became friends. That's how she sees it. And I disappeared. I tried to express my feelings, but she... You can't tell by her gaze that she's indifferent to you. Possibly. But she claims the opposite. She says we're just friends. And the fact that I'm not free pushes her away. She doesn't want to be with a married man. And what about Agata? Agata? She has her career. And a strict boss. I'm between two fires. Maybe you should talk to her? Explain the situation? I already have. She promised that as soon as she signs the contract and goes to work in Europe, she'll try to file for divorce. And when will she sign this contract? Next week. Should I wait for you? They arrived at Teresa's house. Basilio got out to see her off. It's not necessary. Teresa answered instead of the man and pulled his hand. Basilio, happy, followed her. Teresa decided to give Basilio a chance after all, Leo said, and started moving from his seat. Do you think it's worth it? Dorotea decided to delicately probe Basilio's friend about the seriousness of his intentions. I think so. Basilio is a balanced person, everything goes according to plan and as it should be for him. He was burdened by such a life setup, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't change it. It's a habit. Meeting Teresa brought some confusion into his life, which he was very happy about. Her directness and unpredictability in actions amaze him. He never knows what to expect from her. And it brings variety into his life. So her unpredictability could also be the reason for their breakup. Over time, he'll want stability and certainty, and I don't think Teresa can give him that. But he doesn't need it. On the contrary, he wants his life to be filled with surprises. Even if they're not always pleasant, he wants them to keep him on his toes and prevent boredom. So, Teresa is just entertainment for him? Dorotea, don't exaggerate. He loves her very much. And when he found out she was expecting a child, he went crazy. He's willing to do anything to be with her. Even return to a dull and monotonous life if that's what Teresa wants. They arrived at Dorotea's home. Dorotea was about to get out of the car. Thank you for a wonderful evening. I'll walk you up. Leo also got out of the car. They silently walked to her entrance. Dorotea, I would really like to see you again. The woman looked at him attentively. She was slightly hurt that he hadn't even called her all this time, and now, after an unexpected encounter, he decided to invite her on a date. Did she somehow give him the impression that she didn't care? Leo, I have a lot of work. I'm afraid tonight will make me work overtime for the rest of the week. And on the weekend, I promised the kids we'd go out of town. Of course, she hadn't planned anything like that, but she needed to make Leo understand that she had her own life and wasn't eager to let just anyone into it. Dorotea, are you angry with me? For not keeping in touch after our goodbye in the office? He took her by the shoulders. I'm sorry. I wanted to sort out my family life first. Or rather, the absence of it in reality and its presence on paper. I even made some progress, but our meeting happened before. Leo, I don't care what's happening in your family. Well, I sympathize with your situation, but I thought we were friends. And you just disappeared. Maybe that's how it should be in your understanding. But I'm used to my friends somehow communicating with me. At least by phone. Why didn't you call me then? I did call, but your phone was out of range, Dorotea fibbed. She didn't want to be the first to call Leo. After his confession, she hoped he would continue trying to turn their friendship into something more intimate. That's strange. I didn't receive any notifications that you called, the man muttered in confusion. Anyway, I'm sorry. Everything I said that evening was true. You do matter to me. I want to be with you. Not just as a friend, as a man. But you're right, I have nothing to offer you right now except my love. I'm dealing with this situation. And I'm ready to be just a friend to you until I figure it out. Please, don't push me away. How can I push you away when you keep disappearing? Dorotea smirked. It won't happen again. Can my daughter and I join you on the trip out of town? Yes. Of course. Dorotea's lie determined her plans for the weekend. We just haven't decided where to go yet. I know a beautiful place. There's a small resort, a lake, and a forest. If you want, we can go there. Great. Let's go to the resort. Then I'll call and make reservations tomorrow. Excellent. Silence hung in the air. There didn't seem to be anything else to say. Usually, when lovers are in this situation, they start kissing, Dorotea thought to herself, but aloud she said, Well then, goodbye. See you on the weekend. Yeah, goodbye. Leo bid farewell, but he remained standing there. Dorotea decided to demonstrate her friendly disposition towards him and lifted herself up to give him a kiss on the cheek. But Leo suddenly turned his head towards her, and instead of his cheek, her lips met his. In an instant, he enveloped her in his embrace and began kissing her passionately. Dorotea wanted to push him away, but her long loneliness, their reconciliation, and his passionate impulse didn't give her a chance to do so. They stood there, kissing in front of the entrance, like teenagers in love for the first time. Breathing heavily, they separated from each other. After a brief silence during which Leo anxiously looked at Dorotea, she laughed. This doesn't seem like a friendly farewell kiss. The man sighed with relief. I'm sorry. I've been dreaming about this for too long. So when your lips were so close, I couldn't hold back. Don't apologize. Dorotea felt light and carefree. I couldn't resist either. It's been too long since anyone kissed me. I can do it again, Leo grinned. No. That would be too much. Dorotea laughed. I have to go. Goodbye. She fluttered into the entrance, rushed into the elevator, and pressed her fingers to her lips. She wanted to seal that kiss in her memory. Leo approached his car leisurely. He sat behind the wheel and smiled. She cares about him. That means there's a chance. But first, he needs to sort things out with Agata. Dorotea woke up with a smile on her lips. After yesterday's kiss with Leo, she couldn't shake off the wonderful mood. She spent a long time choosing her outfit, carefully applying makeup, and styling her hair. You've brought a ray of sunshine to our dreary office. Teresa greeted her with a smile. What's the reason for this happiness? Let me guess. You spent the night with Leo. Not at all. Then you've piqued my curiosity. We kissed. Teresa stared at her in bewilderment. Are you kidding? People don't radiate happiness just from a kiss. For you, kisses are something regular. You're used to them. But I haven't experienced anything like this in years. I almost forgot how it feels and what sensations it brings. Dorotea smiled and dreamily looked up at the ceiling. Well, spill the details. At that moment, one of their colleagues entered the office. Ladies, the CEO is calling everyone for a meeting. Teresa and Dorotea exchanged glances. Why is everyone being called all of a sudden? I won't keep you in suspense, the director began once everyone had settled down. Time is money. My superiors have recognized my hard work over all these years and have decided to promote me by transferring me to the headquarters. They have entrusted me with choosing my replacement. To avoid offending anyone with my choice, I have selected several candidates, and the final decision will be made by all of you through a vote. You will choose your new CEO. The manager fell silent and surveyed everyone present. You have 2 weeks to think it over, the boss continued. Write the name of your chosen candidate on a piece of paper and drop it into this box. The director tapped the small box on the table. After 2 weeks, in your presence, I will open it, and we will see whom you have chosen. But for now, let me announce the candidates. Dorotea, you're on a winning streak. Teresa exclaimed, almost jumping as she returned to her workstation. You've got a fantastic man in your life, and you've been nominated for CEO. Well, first of all, Dorotea replied in the same tone as Teresa, the fantastic man is married, and secondly, I've been nominated for CEO as a formality, I believe. Well, first of all, Teresa retorted, Basilio said that Leo really doesn't live with his wife, and they're only staying married because it could harm her career. And secondly, you're a specialist in our company's field and know all the work from the inside out. Unlike lawyers, economists, and all those other incomprehensible types. Plus, people love you. So, I think the CEO position is within your reach. All right, go back to work. Dorotea laughed, flattered. You won't even feel my leadership, you'll go on maternity leave. As soon as Dorotea entered her office, Ignacio followed right behind her. You look wonderful, he began. Ignacio, let's get to the point. I have a lot of work to do. Dorotea didn't want to talk to him, especially since his candidacy was also nominated for the CEO position, and she could guess the direction of the conversation. But to her surprise, he didn't start with that. I saw you with that man. Well, that boy who was fixing something here. Ignacio tried to sound disdainful, but he wasn't very successful at it. That's none of your business, Dorotea wearily looked at him. If you wanted to talk about that, then I'm sorry, I really have a lot of work. You're trying to impress the higher-ups, huh? The man got angry. To get a high position? You need someone to provide for your young lover. Ignacio, leave. Dorotea was surprised by this behavior from her former lover. He had never allowed himself such things before. Do you think I'll let some kid raise my son? Ignacio became more agitated. Ignacio, get out, or I'll call security right now. Dorotea said firmly, without raising her voice. What's going on here? The CEO entered the office. Ignacio, have you decided to eliminate your competitors? Through threats and shouting? I didn't expect such incompetence from you. Go back to work. The last contract was sloppy. Dorotea, let's go over the documents for the new device. The director turned away from Ignacio, indicating that the conversation was over. Reluctantly, Ignacio headed towards the door. It was clear that he had more to say, but his career was at stake, and he didn't want to risk it. Leo nervously tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. The wretched traffic jam seemed to never dissipate. He was afraid he would be late for his meeting with Agata, and she wouldn't agree to his proposal. Finally, the traffic started moving again. Leo increased his speed as much as he could. Agata was already waiting for him, anxiously checking her watch. Sorry, got stuck in traffic. Leo's heart sank at his wife's displeased expression. It was all over. It's fine, her dissatisfaction seemed unrelated to him. I don't have much time, so if you don't mind, I'll start. Is that okay? Yes, Leo sighed. Well, the thing is, my boss and I, Agata hesitated, well, we're having an affair. And the other day, he proposed to me. Leo, I know we haven't loved each other for a long time, and I'm very grateful to you for not divorcing me all these years. But now, I know you want the same thing. Let's get divorced. But what about your contract? Leo asked, finding it hard to believe his luck. Oh. Agata waved her hand dismissively. Olivia will take care of everything. As soon as we get divorced. Olivia, apparently, was Agata's new love. She fell silent for a moment, but Leo could tell she had more to say. Taking a deep breath, she finally spoke up. Here's something else, Leo. As soon as Olivia and I get married, we'll immediately move to Europe. The thing is, Nora. What about Nora? Leo panicked. If Agata moved to Europe, he wouldn't be able to see his daughter. Well, the thing is, I'm afraid I won't have any time to take care of our daughter. Can you take her with you? Agata looked at her husband hopefully. Of course. Leo almost jumped for joy. Of course, I'll be happy if Nora stays with me. That's wonderful then. Agata sighed with relief. Let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead with the divorce. Did you want to tell me something? Agata looked at Leo. He had been so lost in thought about her proposal that he had been driving on autopilot. Huh? What? What did you say? He didn't understand. But you insisted on this meeting. What did you want to talk to me about? Oh, yes. The same thing you wanted to talk about. Divorce? Leo nodded affirmatively. And who is she? What do you mean, who? Well, for many years, everything was fine with you, and suddenly you want a divorce. That means you've met someone else. Agata explained her deduction. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a jealous person. I'm actually glad that you've met someone. I just really hope that our daughter won't suffer because of your new love interest. I hope she's a good person. She's wonderful. Dorotea sat on a low bench, admiring the lake. The base turned out to be located in a beautiful, picturesque place. It felt like they had stepped into the past. Small wooden houses by the lake, surrounded by forest. No dust, no city noise and hustle, just silence and tranquility. Can I join you? The girl's voice snapped Dorotea out of her thoughts. Yes, of course. It's really beautiful, isn't it? Very much so. When Dad saw this place, he fell in love with it immediately. No wonder. I'm ready to stay here forever too. People who want to come here have to make reservations months in advance. Seriously? How did your dad manage to find a spot for us then? It's not surprising. It's his base. And the cabin where they put us is his personal one, so no one else occupies it. But it must be a huge job to take care of such a base. He should be constantly present here. And Leo is always in the city. Moreover, he's engaged in completely different work. That's how it used to be at first. He lived at the base and took care of everything himself. But then he met Mom. And he had to hire a manager and move to the city. Mom doesn't like living outside the city. To avoid getting bored, he started repairing electronic devices. But he still comes here often. Dorotea pondered. A new side of Leo was revealed to her. Hugo came running, panting. Mom. Let's go. We're all ready. The boys with Leo were grilling meat and setting the table outdoors. It was decided that since they were the majority, the girls would be exempt from household chores. Smiling, Dorotea looked at the sleeping boys. The intoxicating forest air, food, and outdoor games had worn them out completely. Even Gabriel, who was seemingly already an adult, had returned to his childhood and was playing children's games with Hugo and Nora. Dorotea wrapped a warm, white scarf around her neck and stepped out into the hallway. There was no sound coming from the room where Nora and Leo were staying either. They must be sleeping like a top, Dorotea thought. And no wonder, Leo had been busy the whole day with his tasks related to the base, as well as taking care of the guests. While urging Dorotea to relax and enjoy nature, Leo played with the children, grilled meat, and prepared salads. Dorotea's path led to the lake. She wanted to sit in silence, gaze at the water, and ponder. Leo was captivating her more and more. She didn't know how to act around him. It seemed like they had an agreement to remain friends, and he was keeping his end of the deal, no hints, accidental touches, or suggestive looks. But she could literally feel how he looked at her, how he restrained himself, how he wanted to be with her. Dorotea wanted to cast aside all doubts and surrender to her feelings. But memories of past unsuccessful relationships held her back. She had to heal her wounded heart for too long after those experiences. Someone was sitting on the bench. Dorotea felt disappointed and slowed her pace. She looked around, but there were no more benches nearby. Shaking her head, she decided to take a walk along the lakeside path. "Can't you sleep?" A familiar voice made Dorotea tremble. It was too romantic of a setting to encounter him like this. "Leo? What are you doing here?" "Probably the same thing as you, breathing fresh air and admiring the lake at night. Except you dressed lightly. There's a chill coming from the lake." "Oh?" Dorotea didn't know what to reply. "It's all right. Come here, I'll move a little. And I also have a big blanket and a thermos of coffee. It's enough for the two of us." "Do you always come here like this?" she asked, surprised by such a warm setup. "Yes, even in winter." They were sitting, wrapped in the same blanket, and sipped aromatic coffee. "Tell me about yourself," Leo requested. "I don't think my life would seem interesting to you. Just an ordinary fate of a lonely woman who's unlucky in love." Yielding to some impulse, Dorotea told him everything: her desire to get married, how she fulfilled her dream, her early widowhood, and the encounter with a new love. She even revealed the name of her first love. She talked about the punishment she endured for her trustfulness and her decision to have a second child without a father. And she shared her feelings towards Leo, and how she feared those feelings. He looked into her eyes for a long time. Dorotea felt like he was trying to see into her soul, and she had already started mentally scolding herself for her candor. But unexpectedly, Leo took her face in his hands and kissed her. Softly and tenderly. "I will never hurt you," he whispered directly onto her lips. "I will always be there for you, no matter what happens or how you feel about me. Just trust me." Leo pulled back and then again embraced her, holding her close. "I understand your concerns, but I want to dispel them. Our age difference doesn't bother me, especially since it's not that significant. Besides, you look much younger than your years. So the 8-year gap between us is hardly noticeable. And another thing, Agata and I are getting divorced. Her new partner will help her resolve her marital status issues for the contract. But Nora will stay with me. Agata doesn't have the means to raise her. I think that's the only thing that should push you away." "Nora? Pushing you away? Are you out of your mind?" Dorotea exclaimed in surprise. "How can a child push someone away? I have 2 of my own. And I always dreamed of having a daughter." "Well, here we go," Leo said happily. "What do you mean?" Dorotea didn't understand. Leo got up from the bench and started searching in his pockets. Perplexed, Dorotea watched him. Finally, he seemed to have found what he was looking for and, looking at Dorotea, knelt down on one knee. "Dorotea, I understand it's still early to do this, but I'm not asking for an immediate answer. Just promise me you'll think about it." He reached out to her with a charming ring. Dorotea twirled the gifted ring on her finger and didn't notice someone knocking on the office door. She promised Leo that she would think about it and accepted the ring. If he truly meant what he said and everything he told her came from the bottom of his heart, she would throw herself into this whirlpool one more time. The final time. Then her thoughts shifted to the upcoming dinner she had invited Leo and his daughter to. She wanted her aunt to cast her perceptive gaze upon Leo and pass her judgment. "You've completely immersed yourself in work and made your way to the top." Dorotea startled at the loud voice that sounded right next to her ear. Don't worry, I asked around, and most people lean toward choosing you for the position. Oh, what's this? Dorotea, still not fully transitioning from her thoughts to what Teresa was saying, stared at her in bewilderment. However, Teresa was not bothered by that. Did he propose to you? How did it happen? I hope you said yes. When's the wedding? What wedding? Dorotea didn't have a chance to respond as Ignacio entered the office, as usual, without knocking. Our Dorotea is getting married. If only Teresa knew who she was saying that to. Ignacio's face turned red. Is it that repairman? He sarcastically asked and glared at Dorotea. It is him, the woman retorted. And he's not only a skilled professional in his field, but also the owner of a magnificent tourist resort. Oh, come on. Where did he get the money for such a pleasure? Unless he swindled one of his clients. On what basis are you making such conclusions? A simple laborer can't have that kind of money. And who can? Successful lawyers living off their wives' apartments? Or undesirable machismo men? That's exactly what I'm saying. What can attract a not-so-young single mother with 2 children to a young and wealthy resort owner? So what's actually happening? Teresa's loudly asked question made the arguing parties remember her presence. What do you think you're doing, Ignacio? How dare you speak to your colleague, a woman, like that? What right do you have to insult her fiancé? It's none of your business, Teresa. How dare you? Teresa proudly protruded her huge belly and headed straight for the lawyer. Get out of here. We need to work. I see how you're working. Ignacio retorted, not as confidently. I'm here to discuss working stuff too, by the way. Send one of your colleagues then. Dorotea also stood up from her desk. I have no desire to communicate with you. Not about work, not about personal matters. We'll see about that. Don't forget, Dorotea, I have certain rights. I'm afraid your rights won't go well with your new wife. Dorotea, what's going on? Teresa sat down in a small armchair next to a small table with an electric kettle. After Ignacio left, Dorotea went to that corner of the office and took out cups and sweets from the drawer. She turned on the kettle. Ignacio is Hugo's father, Dorotea said wearily. But you said. I lied. I didn't want anyone to know how humiliatingly I was treated. Dorotea, Teresa touched her friend. Why did you do that? I could have supported you back then. Why don't you trust me? I do trust you. It's just. It hurt so much, it was humiliating and disgusting. Promise me you won't do something like that again. Even if we all grossly misjudge Leo, I'll be the first to find out if something's not right with you. Okay. Dorotea, you should take him. Don't let go of your happiness while it's within reach. Aunt wiped the dishes carefully, washing them before handing them to Dorotea. I've never seen such a genuine man. That's exactly what I'm saying. Aunt Dorotea, you should take him. Nora, were you eavesdropping? Dorotea glanced reproachfully at her aunt and, feeling embarrassed, looked at the little girl. No, you just didn't notice that I came in. I decided to help clear the table while Dad and Uncle Pablo were tasting the liqueur. Aunt rushed out of the kitchen and went into the living room. Pablo, I guess you should stop drinking the liqueur right now. I won't drag you home. We just had a little sip. Pablo began to justify himself. I know your sips. Aunt. Dorotea, who followed her aunt into the living room, looked at her in surprise. Did I miss something? Well, we didn't want to tell you until you figured things out in your own life. Tell me what? Pablo proposed to me. It seems his liqueur is against it, though. Oh, come on, my dear. I just wanted Leo to appreciate my new recipe. Indeed, dear ladies, Leo decided to intervene. We really just had a little sip. Okay then. Aunt waved her towel. Clear away your little sips. We'll have coffee now. And now, let's summarize the voting results. The CEO beamed like a polished coin. The candidates glanced at each other. With a slight margin and unanimous votes, our head of the construction department, Dorotea Navarro, is the winner. Let's congratulate her. Everyone clapped in unison. Dorotea stood up from her seat, waited for the noise to subside, and smiled. My dear colleagues, I'm very grateful to you for your trust, but unfortunately, I have to decline this prestigious position. The room buzzed with chatter, and Dorotea raised her hand, calling for silence. Let me explain. Besides being a highly prestigious position, and let's not hide it, well paid, it is also incredibly responsible. I would even say mega responsible. Furthermore, it requires a person who holds it to have an irregular work schedule, frequent business trips, and a lot of energy. I'm not saying that I'm afraid of all the aforementioned. I just want to share with you, I'm getting married, and I want to dedicate myself to my family, my husband, and children. So, please forgive me, but I believe our chief engineer, who you gave almost as many votes as me, is more than deserving of this position. Everyone started whispering. Some rushed to congratulate Dorotea on her upcoming marriage, others shook hands with the chief engineer, and some surrounded the departing CEO. Only the head of the legal department, turning red, almost ran out of the conference room. Teresa, don't you think a young mother shouldn't let loose at a friend's wedding? Dorotea approached her joyful friend. Dorotea, you are a prude. I'm already into diapers and pacifiers. Let me have one evening to hang out. But you said that taking care of the little one would fall entirely on Basilio's shoulders. Yeah, right. Of course, I'll take care of my own child myself. Basilio can only help me occasionally. Today is a special day. That's why I allowed his mom to babysit. So don't interrupt me reminiscing about my youth, because tomorrow I'll be a caring mother and loving wife again. Dorotea, the fiancée, approached the women. I would like to steal you for a slow dance. With pleasure. Dorotea smiled at her friend and followed her husband. They walked into the center of the large restaurant hall where the wedding was taking place. Pablo and his wife were already dancing, as well as Dorotea's aunt. I love you, Leo whispered in Dorotea's ear. And I love you too, she replied and pressed her lips against his.